Oh my stars, this is a very blue, Christmassy winter table runner. Good morning, everybody. It's Stephen here for Bland Designs, and this is my weekly vlog number 138 for Monday, October the 20th, 2019, and this is Election Day in Canada. Today's the day when we go to exercise our right to vote for whatever a-hole we're going to put into power for the next 4 years. Again, yeah, more on that later. So, what have I been up to? Well, behind me you can see my latest creation. It's a Christmas table runner, although from the distance you're looking at it, it doesn't really look like Christmas. It just looks like blue stars, but it is actually Christmas fabric that's in it. But it's a subtle fabric, so if you want to use this throughout the winter, you could. I love making things at Christmas time, and actually I should move over here a little bit. Just let me adjust the camera a teensy bit. There you go. I didn't put that in the best spot. Anyways, I do love making Christmas things. And I get started early on them, and it's just the Christmas fabric. I really love Christmas fabric because it's always very, very pretty. Anyways, that's what I was up to this week, and I also did a Christmas banner, but I haven't got it finished yet, so I'm not going to show it to you until it is finished. This is, by the way, quilted. I know it's difficult to see because I used a light blue thread in that, and I just did walking foot quilting, and this is what the back looks like. And it was just leftover fabric I just cut into strips. And yeah, so probably next week I will show you the table or the Christmas banner, and I just have to do an adjustment here. It's a little crooked. Okay, I guess that's better. Not sure. Okay, so that takes us to the YouTube channel of the week. Now, this is a lady who's actually married to the guy who does Curiosity Ink, which I'm sure you have seen. It's very popular. A guy who owns a curiosity shop, he calls it, or an antique vintage stuff shop out in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I did review his channel some weeks ago, actually probably more like months ago, and his wife has one as well. So check this out. YouTube channel of the week is called Melissa Archbold. Now this may be a familiar name to you if you watch Curiosity Inc. That's Alex Archbold, her husband, who has done the whole series about the Potter's House and about his new shop out in Edmonton. He deals with antiques and vintage items and things like that. Well, this is Melissa's channel, and she really focuses upon her family and on tasting different types of food that come along, and just talks in general about their life in Edmonton. So if you're interested in seeing how other people live, possibly Canadians for that matter, because they are Canadians, then you might want to check out Melissa Archbold's channel. So I have the link listed below, and there's the link to Stephen and Walter Live from this week, and we did talk extensively about the Canadian election and about the various parties that we have the opportunity to vote for, and who we won't be voting for, and who we will be voting for. So if you're interested in Canadian politics, you might want to check that out. There's also the link to today's book, and there's the link to my blog. And also there is a link to the iCraft Scalloped Photo Album, or Gatefold Album, that we've been making for the last couple of weeks. And what I've done is, today you will see the last installment of that, but I have put all 3 installments together as one video so that if you're interested in pursuing that in more detail, you don't have to go through 3 vlogs to see it all. It's all put together as one separate video, and the link is below. Okay, so what's pissing me off this week? Well, it's the whole federal election thing, and I'm going to be so glad that it's over after today. Later this morning, Walter and I are going out to vote, and we'll probably stay up tonight to watch the results come in and see who's going to be wrecking our country for the next 4 years. Do I sound optimistic? No, I'm not optimistic. And this is what pisses me off about this federal election. I don't know if they realize how much anxiety and fear and dread they put into the Canadian population, the average citizen. All elections, not just Canadian elections, do this because we're all worried about the future. In some cases, it's the devil you know, which is the outgoing government. They've done their worst to us, maybe, and we got used to it. But now, something new on the horizon. I am sure many people would like to be hopeful. I would like to be hopeful that this next government that comes in is going to be better than the one before. But history dictates that that's not going to be the case because this is one time when history usually repeats itself. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter which party we put into power. They all screw us, right? They are not there for the people. I have said this before. I have said this many times before, that politicians are not there for the people. They're in it for themselves. It's very obvious. They like the power. They like the money. They like the publicity or whatever, whether it's positive or negative. It doesn't really matter. No such thing as bad publicity, it's been said. But for the rest of us, it gives us a great deal of anxiety. Now, in Canada, we have a very philosophical way of looking at elections. We get all riled up about them when we're about to vote. Of course, we're stirred up by the media and everything else that's going on. And then after it's all over with, we go, well, whoever got in 4 years' time, we'll just vote them out and vote in somebody new. That's the way we go about it. Yes, I have my preferences as to who I would like to see in power, and I make no bones about it. The lesser of all the evils is Justin Trudeau, our present Prime Minister. I think he has done a reasonably good job given the fact that, all politicians, what I've already said about them being in it for themselves, and he is too. But I think he has done the least amount of damage to our country. You get somebody in like Andrew Scheer, the leader of the Conservative Party, which is extremely right in its beliefs. And, there's the whole Christian fundamentalism in there. They don't care about women's rights. They're anti-abortion. They're anti-LGBTQ. They're anti-people, basically. They're all for big businesses and all of that kind of thing. But for the average person, no, they could care less. So, no, they're a very big evil. And that's what's giving me the anxiety right now. There's a possibility they could get into power. And then we've got 4 years of horror happening, okay? You've heard me say this before, if you follow me regularly, that Andrew Scheer is basically, who's the leader of the Conservative Party, is basically mini Trump, okay? And as far as I'm concerned, Justin Trudeau is our version of Obama, okay? So we've got, heaven and hell fighting it out here in the election. Now the media is predicting that possibly we'll have a minority government, and that's not necessarily always a good thing. I mean, if it's a liberal minority, fine, that's the party I want to get into power, but the Conservatives will block them every which way. Everything they try to do, the Conservatives will block them. And they'll block them not because they think what the Liberals are doing is necessarily a bad thing for Canadians. They block them just for point of principle here, that they didn't get into power, so they're not going to let the other party have any power. And so nothing gets done in a minority government. What would be really nice, my ideal of ideals, and I don't think this is going to happen, but if it was in a perfect world, the Liberals would get a vast majority that would blow the Conservatives right out of the water, reduce them to a non-party status. That would be excellent. The reason I say that is not just because I feel that the Conservatives will do absolutely nothing for the average Canadian, but because we've got our own little mini Trump as our provincial premier, Doug Ford, it would really nip him in the bud, because he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips and that he can get away with whatever. And he's been slashing and cutting in our province left and right to the detriment of a lot of our groups out there that really need government support, like autistic children, the school system, the medical system, etc. He's just been slashing and burning all the way along. And he thinks because there were idiots who voted him into power, and they were idiots that voted him into power. If the Conservatives at the federal level get a majority government, he's going to interpret that as being a thumbs up from the Canadian people that we want a conservative style of government, and that'll just give him more power, more fuel to throw on the fire, kind of a thing. So there'll be no stopping him. So that, I think, is the main reason why I'm a little bit anxious about this election. If the Conservatives get in, it's bad news not only for our country, but bad news for my province as well. So anyways, back to what I'm pissed off about is, why is it this kind of thing gets most thinking people upset, gives us anxiety, puts us into therapy for several months after the election? I'm surprised that you don't hear about people after one of these elections committing suicide, because that's how desperate politics are these days. Yes, this is fueled by all the other political situations around the world. And of course, I have to bring it back to the Americans as well, because the Americans do influence us in Canada, since they're our closest neighbors. And of course, we have felt, as well as the Americans, the repercussions of what Trump has done there. And when we have people in our own political system who behave in a Trump-like manner, well, we're just going to hell in a handbasket. That's what I think. So it gives me anxiety. But we'll know today, after we go off and vote and after the results come in, and we're going to know what kind of hell we're going to be living through for the next 4 years. So stay tuned for that. Okay, let's move on. So, what have a new product? Well, it's a new product in a sense. On the weekend, I went to the Creative Fest. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But while I was there, I found some embroidery designs for making pin cushions with my embroidery machine. Now, we have a guild show coming up very soon in November. And at our guild show, besides showing quilts, we have a boutique. And any money that comes in to the show is really the funding we use for the next 3 years to run the guild. So every little bit counts. So I thought, because they're looking for things for their boutique, that I might make these pin cushions. I thought, I don't like the design. So I got this design that makes these kind of pin cushions. It's okay, but there's a name for this and I can't pronounce it. It's French. By Cush or something. It means wacky. Yes, these are kind of wacky. Of course, part of the wackiness might be the way that I sewed it. I don't know, but it's supposed to have sort of a, I don't know, triangular things along the side. It would look better if I did it in 2 different fabric colors, but I want to see how this would work out. So I'm not really impressed. Actually, I'm going to use this one for myself because I don't care really what it looks like, because it's just to hold pin cushions. But to sell it at a boutique, I don't think so. So I went looking for another design for a pin cushion. And I found this, and this one's a cute little one. It's also done in the hoop, okay, in embroidery. The machine sews all of this together. Well, you have to do a few things, but, and this one I filled with crushed walnut shells because I found them at this creative festival we were at in packages, and I have heard that people put them in pin cushions because they basically not only weight down the pin cushion, but they sort of sharpen your pins as you stick them in here somehow. So it's cute, it's nice, but I'm not going to bother. I was going to make a bunch of these for the bazaar, but I think they're too simplistic, and I think they're, you know, it's a pin cushion. Everybody that sews has a pin cushion or two. Now, some people collect them, but I just, not going to bother. So I did decide, though, to do something that I've shown you before, and that's what they call the freestanding lace angels, which are Christmas tree ornaments. I can rattle off a bunch of those in a couple of hours with very little stress on me. And so I made 6, and I've packaged them. And I'm going to take them, tonight is our monthly guild meeting. So I'll take them to the guild meeting and offer them to the people who organize the boutique and see if this is something they would like to sell. And if they would like more, I'll make more as well for that. So that'll be one of my contributions to the boutique table. So the only thing I got new this week was this pattern, And I got it for a really good price, and it's not useless. It doesn't just make pin cushions. It basically does quilt blocks and with some decorative stitches. And so I might, at some point in time, actually make a quilt trying this method. I mean, it's not any faster than making a quilt the standard way, but it's something a little different. And I love working with my embroidery part of my machine. So maybe, we'll see. In fact, as I speak, I've just downloaded another pattern for a quilting square that could make really cute coasters, which might be something else I might make, if I get time, before the Guild Show, and put those on the boutique table as well. Maybe make them in Christmas fabrics. I got lots of scraps of that around, and that's all you need. So we'll see. Water. Yes, water, not coffee. Having that problem again that I mentioned before with the heartburn, and I think it's coffee that's doing it. So anyways, on to water. What's up next? Okay, so this week's book review from my stash. Handmade books. Actually, this is the essential guide to making handmade books. This is a great book. It was very expensive when I bought it. It was $38.99 Canadian. But inside it shows you all the techniques for book binding and for the materials that you will need. These are not simple little scrapbook or scrap paper type albums or junk journals. These are actually hardcover books and how to properly bind them. And I have made a few over the years, hardcover journals, and this was the book I went to learn from this. So if you're really interested in making really nice hardbound journals, albums, then this is the book for you. Now, can you get it? Guess what? You can. It is still available. However, the price is not good. Okay, I've put a link to it in the show notes below from Amazon.ca, but the price they want for it, I said I paid $38.99, and I don't know how many years ago it was that I bought it. Well, on Amazon it's $40.91, and there's probably shipping on top of that. You might find this book in your local library. You might find it in a bookstore somewhere. I don't know. I don't know if you'll get it any cheaper. Well, if it's in a library, you can sign it out, right? But I feel that this one is one of those type of books that's an investment. If you're serious about doing albums and learning bookbinding techniques, then this should be an essential book to your library of that. And if that's the case, the way I think about it, then it's worth the money. But it is a good book, and it is by Gabriel Fox. So I've got the link in the show notes below to that. Okay, so that takes us to the last installment of our Scalloped Gatefold album that we've been making over the last few weeks, and now I'm doing the final embellishing of this. I did run into a couple of problems that I talk about on this video, and you'll see how I solved them. So here it is. Okay, so I have embellished the Scalloped Gatefold album, and I did something a little different this time from what I usually do. I was kind of stretching my imagination as to how I could embellish this, and so I'll show you what I did, and then I'm going to explain some other things that I did that were actually mistakes that I had to correct. First off, as you can see, I put a bow around this because I've used some 3D embellishments, and it does make it a little bit on the thick side. So to keep it held open, or closed that is, I added this. Now this was a piece of trim off of something else, a project that I'd done a long time ago. Had this laying around, and it works very well on here. Now to reinforce it, I did glue it. Luckily it has this little spine piece. I did glue it again with my favorite glue, the Gorilla Clear glue, super glue, and that's just reinforcing it on the back. So let's open this up and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, so here's my front covers, and as you know, it's a gatefold, so one piece goes over top the other. Now, originally, back in the second segment of this, you saw me put a couple of magnets on here. And I left those magnets. Actually, I had to readjust them, and I'll explain why in a bit. but just to close it. But it's not, doesn't hold it together very well. Magnets aren't that strong, so that's why I added this piece of ribbon. Excuse me. On here you can see I have a collage of Victorian graphics. Now, where did I get these? And you're going to see more of them inside. I get graphics from a website called Graphics Fairy, and I've been collecting them. And I think I mentioned them in one of my vlogs earlier about Graphics Fairy, that every Friday they will send you out a set of free graphics, and they're copyright free and you can use them whatever way you want. And they're great. They're usually very vintagey, very Victorian in style. So what I did with all the graphics you'll see in this album is I uploaded them to the Cricut Maker, and then I had the Cricut Maker print them out. Well, the Cricut Maker doesn't do the printing, your printer does. But then the Cricut Maker knows where to cut these out. So I did not have to fussy cut these. These were fussy cut by the Cricut Maker, which it does take a little time, but not as much time as to fussy cut them out, especially when you see how many I have. I also decided to add another layer of dimension to this album, and this is where I had a problem, which I'm going to discuss in a moment, by adding some metal embellishments that I have in my stash. A lot of these are jewelry pieces that I pull apart, junk jewelry. I go to my local charity store and I pick up some really cheap junk jewelry, and I pull them apart to use the various elements. So that's what you can see right here on the cover. And then, of course, when you open this up, you've got the next part of the gatefold technique. Now, if I'd been a little smarter, I would have used flatter magnets and I would have buried them underneath this graphic, but I didn't think about that at the time. So you can see my magnets. Now, what I could do to cover these up is take a little thin paper flower, a little paper one, and just stick it on both of these, and it would add as an extra embellishment to it, and the magnets would still probably work through if I made the paper thin enough. I did go through my stash and found some 3D elements, flowers, you'll see them throughout, and some butterflies, and I added those two to each of the pages. Now, what makes this album a little unique is the way that I set it up. There is real estate in here for photographs in behind here on the big part. So you could tuck in a picture or two or a larger journaling card, because each of these that you're going to see I made as a pocket. Now, how did I do that? Well, rather than sticking these on all at once, I created a band, which you can't really see very well, but it runs under here. I created a little band from some of my scrapbook paper in my stash and rounded the corners of it. And then, before I mounted it to the page, I actually mounted these elements onto it. And so you can see these elements, if I pull these little cards out, I'll explain these in a minute, you can see that this creates the pocket. And these are above the band a little bit. So that gives it some place to tuck in things. So I did every page like this. And the idea here is if you have a 4x6 picture or something, or smaller, you can tuck it right in the back there if you want. You could also tuck in a larger journaling page as well. But these little cards are also from Graphics Fairy, and I just had Adobe Photoshop Elements print these out. I cut them out. Actually, I went through the organizer in Photoshop Elements, and it allowed me to print out pages of these multiple in the same size. And I just put my paper trimmer, trim them down, and I went around the edges with some oxide vintage photo ink just to give them a little bit more dimension. And they just tuck right in here. But the thing is, the backs are blank. So again, small pictures or journaling or whatever could be mounted on those too. So you see, you get a lot of real estate here for a lot of different elements. On the two flat pages, I actually made a pocket out of two of these cards. Mainly because I couldn't think of anything else to do and I had some extras left over, and another loose card that tucks underneath. Again, just an area where you could drop in a picture, a small picture. Now, one thing about creating these pockets, you don't want to use double-sided tape. The reason is some of these cards can get stuck under that that edge. It doesn't seal perfectly, and then they'll stick and they'll be difficult to get in and out. So I just used glue. Now I used the Dries Clear Art Glitter Glue, and I just did a thin bead around 3 sides of the pocket and put that in, and that way these don't stick. You'll also notice I added some more of my 3D embellishments here, some of my jewelry pieces and this little bee, and you'll see this throughout. So this is how it works. So what you have are each of the pages done in exactly the same way with different elements, lots of cards tucked in behind in each panel. Some more of those 3D embellishments. Some of them are jewelry pieces. And the last page. Now, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but you're going to say, wait, I thought this album had about 16 pages, like 4 of these on one side, 4 of these on the other side, made 8. It did. But here's where I made a mistake. This actually wasn't so much a mistake. I kind of knew this was probably going to happen, but I got carried away with the 3D embellishments, and it wouldn't allow the booklet to close. It bowed out, like drastically, like almost like a semicircle. So I was trying to think, what could I do about that? Well, the only solution I could come up with was to remove some of the pages, and I did. Luckily, they came out fairly easily. I did damage the spine along here. I took a black magic marker, a Sharpie, and just went over it so that it blends in. When you look at it up close, though, it does look a little rough. Now, if I wanted to, what I could do is probably take some washi tape in the same theme as what I'm using here, the Victorian style, and just put it down along these seams, and that would cover that up without any problem. So that's what I did, and that was my mistake. And actually, if we go back to the cover, right here, these were already on pages that were in the album before, and I was thinking, what can I put on the outside of the album? Well, I just pulled these off of those pages and re-adhered them to the cover pieces. So overall, I think it turned out pretty nice. It took a while to create. I didn't do it on camera because I think it's pretty evident from the way I've described it. And, you know, when you embellish something, everybody has their own method for it. Also, I do not tie bows very well. One thing I don't like about this album is that it's a little bit on the flimsy side. That's because of the construction paper that the pockets are cut on. And I find that it shifts down here. The pages kind of move a little bit, and that kind of bothers me. And I'm not sure what I could do about that to stop it. But I'm not going to really worry about that at the moment. But just to be aware of that, maybe if I put in some chipboard in the spines as I'm building the pages, that might make it a little sturdier, and then it won't shimmy from side to side. That's a possibility, but that would be something you'd have to do as you're constructing the album, not at the time of when you're embellishing it. So I'm not going to worry about it right now because this is done. So that was the Scalloped Gatefold Album by iCraft. And I will put the entire 3-part series for this up as a separate video. It'll be in one of my playlists on my channel called iCraft Kits. So you don't have to sit through, if you ever want to do this on your own, you don't have to sit through 3 different vlogs. It'll all be contained in one video. So I hope you enjoyed this kit. And the next kit we're going to work on is the iCraft Garden View album, and it's got this neat front to it, and you can see it looks like it's pretty simple to put together. In fact, I don't even think there's any folding. There's no score lines on it. Looks like you got to use those binder rings for it. So this should be kind of fun, and it looks like it's going to give us a lot of real estate. So that's next time. So as I said, I've put all the pieces of that kit together as one video, and I've put a show note or a link in the show notes below for that. Next week we're going to start on this one, the Garden View album. This looks really cool. And according to the instructions on the back, it looks like this one will go together pretty quick. So I'm especially interested in this little chipboard piece at the front on here. So that is what we're going to start on next week. Okay, so that takes us to the events in the past week. Update on my mother. She's driving me mental. She's driving me majorly mental. Okay? I can't get a straight answer out of this lady at all. I called her yesterday, and I always start off with, so what's new? Oh, I don't know. Now, there was something I was going to tell you, and I can't remember what it was. Okay, fine, mother, whatever. Couple of ongoing issues with my mother. One, I told her, okay, Mom, I looked into whether or not you need to have ID to vote today if you decide to vote. I don't think she'll vote. She didn't vote in the last election. She probably won't vote in this one either because it's effort. And, you know, anything that's effort, my mother doesn't want to do. Mind you, the polling station is right in her residence. It's a private polling station in the sense that it's only open to the residents of the nursing home. And I'm sure the nurses there will take her down to wherever room they're doing it in and help her out with the whole thing. And I told her that. I sent them an email. I sent the administration an email to find out whether or not my mother needed any special documentation or ID, because usually when we vote here in Canada, we usually get a voter's card telling us where our polling station is and lists our address and everything. We hand that in to the people that check us in to give us our ballot, and they cross-reference it on their list and, you know, knock it off, kind of a thing. They often ask you to bring like a picture ID, like your driver's license or birth certificate or a passport or something like that as well. So that's all fine and dandy. My mother doesn't have any ID on her because I have all her important documents. So I emailed the administration and asked, and just as I suspected, they don't need a thing because they have all that stuff on record, right? So they know who my mother is. So that's great. So I told my mother that. And then we had this very helpful staff member I'd never met before when I was over to see my mother last week, who really thought it would be a good idea to get my mother's TV mounted on the wall and everything, because she has to, this particular staff member, she's really afraid when she moves my mother's TV, which is on a stand, okay, it's actually a little dresser, it's a little night table kind of thing that's provided by the nursing home. It sits on that, and it's on wheels, this little drawer unit, and I guess sometimes the TV's not in the right position for my mother to view it. So she moves it so my mother can see it, especially when my mother's in bed. Okay, fine and dandy. But she's afraid it might fall off or something like that. Well, yeah, I get that idea. But her idea isn't going to work for a variety of reasons, okay? The thing is, I also suspect it's not because she's trying to be helpful. It's because she's basically lazy, okay? Why do I say that? I don't know this person. I got that attitude from her, that it's just a pain in the butt for her to have to do this and everything. And she's using the excuse that if it falls off. My answer to that is then be very careful with it. However, I considered the idea, but no, for several major factors, like everything from there isn't an outlet and connections for the TV set to work at the far side of the room. There would have to be extension cords running that. They don't like that because, rightly so, residents could trip, tangled up in it, could cause a lot of problems. And she is not one of the head staff people there. She's not the floor nurse or anything like that that looks after all those kind of things. She just took it upon herself to make this suggestion. So no, it's not going to happen. So I'm trying to explain this to my mother. Well, my mother says she doesn't care. She's fine with the way that it is now. Then she says to me, oh, but my headphones aren't working. I said, Mother, it's not your headphones. I already told you this. It's the jack that goes into the television set somehow is not functioning anymore, so you can't use headphones. Well, yeah, but I should get a new pair because they would work. No, Mom, they won't work. That's not the problem. It's not the headphones. It's the jack. I try to explain this to her. Now, my mother's not a dimwit, okay? But sometimes she will act like a dimwit. Also, I do kind of suspect that this moving the television set was not necessarily solely this staff member's idea. It might have been my mother's as well, because my mother can always come up with ideas, okay? She has too much time to think about this kind of stuff. But my mother's very sly, as you know, and she's a bit of a manipulator, and she probably put the idea into the staff's head, or could have. She may not have, but I never know what is right or wrong. But anyways, it just gives me another thing I have to worry about all the time. And then I ask her about my sister being over. I get the same answer all the time. No, I haven't seen your sister. Yeah, you have. I know she's been over there. But she always tells me, no, she hasn't seen her. I don't know what to believe. Anyways, it's just very frustrating, to say the least. And I don't know what to do about it. I don't think anything can be done about it. I guess I just have to be like a duck and let this go right off my back or something. I don't know. Enough about my mother. Okay? The Creative Fest. Okay, so this is something that happens twice a year. It's usually in Toronto. And it, it's supposed to be scrapbooking, quilting, sewing, creative arts kind of a thing. Lots of vendors there and that kind of stuff. Well, we went to the one in the spring and it sucked. There weren't that many vendors there. And they charge you like $14, $15 to get into the thing. And it's really not worth the effort to drive into the far side of Toronto because it's out by the airport in Toronto where they have it. And, fight the traffic to get there, and then they have no vendors. Well, we went anyways for the fall one, and pretty much the same thing. There was nothing really there. I do remember the days back, 5, 6 years ago when they used to have this, and it would be packed. There would be vendors for everything. Lots of people, the whole bit. Now, no, I don't even know why they even bother running it, because they're not getting the vendors anymore. They probably charge an arm and a leg for them to have a booth. I don't know. And if it wasn't for the major sewing machine manufacturers, if those ones hadn't been there, there would have been absolutely nothing. A couple of quilt stores and a scrapbooking store. That would have been about it. So needless to say, it wasn't worth the drive. It wasn't worth the cost of the admission to get in there. And yeah, so it was a bit disappointing. So on Sunday, the town that my mother lives in and my sister live in, not too far from us, had their annual apple festival. Now, we've never been to this before, so we thought we'd go. Oh my God, it was packed. They closed down the main street. They have lots of vendors selling, apples and a lot of food products and a lot of, home craft things, or crap things as I call them, like who needs another knitted baby bonnet? Kind of deal. But anyways, it was just packed. I hate the people with strollers and something like that, because they're right up your gitch with those things. I come home black and blue on my ankles because they keep running into you with those things. And strollers these days are huge. They're like a mobile home on wheels. Like, God, how big are these babies these days? And then there's the people with the dogs. I don't understand why you need to put your dog through the stress of crowds. Why do you bring your dog? And a lot of them are big, big dogs. Why are you bringing your dog to something like this? I don't think your dog is enjoying it with that many people, because they're getting stepped on. They don't know where to look. They're being dragged along by this leash. It's just horrible. But anyways, it was an interesting event. They shouldn't have called it the Apple Festival, though. There was more maple syrup on sale than apples. Every other booth had maple syrup. Wow, you want something typically Canadian? This was it. Everywhere you looked, maple syrup. And then there was apple cider. And then there were a few apples. And then there were people lined up like piggies at the trough. They had one food truck there that was selling freshly made apple fritters. Now, you would think these people had never been to a Tim Hortons and got an apple fritter. But the lineup was humongous to get these things. So I don't know, maybe these people only eat once a year. Because every one of the food trucks everywhere was just lined up for crap. But anyways, it was an event. It was fun to see what was there, if you could get by the crowds and whatnot. And yeah, parking was extremely difficult. We had to park about 4 blocks away, and we were lucky to find that spot. So it was just mayhem and chaos and hell, and I guess that's all part of being part of a festival, the Apple Festival. Bowmanville, anyways, this little town seems to have a festival every other weekend. For a little place, it's very active, that's for sure. So that was pretty much the weekend. So what's coming up? Well, we have a Halloween dance to go to on Friday night, this coming up. And of course, we've got our costumes together. And I did take a short little video yesterday when we were finalizing the costumes that I was going to add to the vlog today, but stupid me. I pushed the wrong button, I guess. I thought it was recording. It didn't, but I did get lovely footage of me walking down the stairs in my house and around because then the camera was on. So needless to say, I don't have any footage, but we'll do some more probably on Friday night before we go to this dance. And then I'll probably put it into, if I push the right buttons, into the vlog for next week. And today this afternoon, I have a sewing class starting up, and I'm going to be taking 2 sewing classes in the next little while. This week is one of them, and next week there'll be 2 in a row on both Monday and Tuesday afternoons, and 2 different projects. So that's going to keep me going for a while, and I'll show you some of the things I'm doing with that and talk a little bit more about that once the classes get going. The one class is a mystery quilt. We're not supposed to know what it's going to look like until we get to the end of it. I cheated. I found the pattern online and I looked at it because I wanted to know how much fabric I needed to buy. That was the one thing the person teaching this didn't really think about when she sent out the initial information. It just said to cut some fabric for the first step. Well, yeah, but there's 6 steps, and you need to know what the fabric is so you're consistent. Or maybe that's part of the mystery. I don't know. But actually, I think it's going to be a really nice quilt from what I've seen. But I told her that I'd already found the pattern and everything. But I'll keep it a secret. I won't let other people see that or tell them what it's going to look like. They've probably looked for it too. Who knows? And the other class is what they call a Bargello quilt, which are kind of neat because they look like you're using straight pieces, but it looks like curves. I've wanted to make one of these for a while, so I'm taking a class. I could probably do it on my own, but I like taking the classes. I always learn something. So I'm taking a class with that, and that should be really good. I've got the fabric all laid out for it, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to those 2 classes. So that's what's coming up this week. And nothing else that I can think of right now that's coming up. So I think that brings us to the end of today's vlog. So Stephen and Walter Live will be on this Sunday coming, 4:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as usual. And as I said, we'll talk more about the Halloween dance then and other things. And I'm not sure what we're going to talk about as our topic of the week yet. Have to think about that. So anyways, I hope you'll join us then. I hope you'll join me for my vlog next week. And I hope you have a good week. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.